All right, thank you so much. So, hello everyone. Welcome to my session, DevTools Deep Dive. I'm Kamal, as you would have introduced that I'm a GD in Flutter and Dart, and I'm also a YouTuber. So, before I start, I would like to emphasize the importance of understanding the tool, which is the dev tool, and also how effectively we can use this in our day-to-day development stage. Because I see most of us are very keen in developing a beautiful UI and getting the backend set and everything. But when you're actually stuck with the app and it's not performing well, you really don't know how to work on it. So I think this tool will definitely help you understand where to look for, what to look for, and how at least you can try solving it if you're not able to solve it completely. So let's see all those details. So when I say DevTools, what it is it a kind of a console or is it a kind of a debugging tool? So I would say it's a debugging tool for both Flutter and Dart. And a point to be noted and a cautious thing that it is currently in the beta release, but there is an effective active development that's happening with it. So definitely you are free to use it, try it out. But if you find something missing, definitely look for open issues if there's someone working on it, or please raise an issue where I'll leave a link in the end of these slides as to where you can get to this tool because everything is open source. So you can raise one and start working on it, or you can help with it, or check the progress on it. So it's purely, this dev tool is purely rebuilt from scratch in Flutter, and so let's take a moment to discuss why Flutter actually came up with this dev tool in the first place. Now, are we not happy using our editors or IDEs? So why did they really come up with this tool? So if you ask me, the one or two reasons I would say. First one is the productivity and the quality. So the Flutter team really understands that the productivity benefits of Flutter while building a beautiful UI, high performance apps. So we want these benefits ourselves, and that's the reason we have this tool. Now, if you look at the things that I would be covering in this tool is there are 6 points. So one is the inspector, timeline, memory, performance, network, debugger. So I think if you have a fair idea of all these aspects, then you're good to go. But if you really want to dive deep into it, then definitely there are links where you can find and explore it. So sometimes, as I mentioned, you know to develop an app, you know how to get it onto the device. But have you ever looked into like leakages or network delays or why that janky performance I'm getting or how do I solve this? So this is where your Dart tool really helps you. So first thing, what all I can do with the DevTools? So first is I can inspect the UI layout. Definitely you can inspect your layout in your IDE, but I'll show you in a bit in my following slide how deeply you can analyze your UI layout and how that layouts are connected with your real device. That's the interesting part about it. So as I mentioned, to give you a gist of it, it is kind of visualizing and exploring your widget tree. So you know everything is widgets here. So when you have a huge set of widget trees, so if you want to explore it, this tool really helps you. Or even diagnosing your layout issues, you can help use this. Or understanding the existing layout. So you code every day. You see rows, you see columns, you see buttons, everything. But if you'd like to see the visual effect of all this, use the inspector, which is the inspecting of your UI layout. Then a little bit about the diagnosing the UI jank. Why should I even think about diagnosing it? So first, let's understand why this jank occurs. So whenever the UI does not render smoothly, so if it's kind of like stopping and then starting again, so that's a jank performance. So we also need to diagnose that. And to give you with a small example, say for example, if you are in fact, very often this happens. You're like, your frame takes 10 times longer than rendering the UI. So to inspect these kind of things and see how where it is getting dropped. So the moment you have an open screen and you click on the button and that animation is kind of delaying your process, immediately you would see some kind of bars appearing, which is in the red color, kind of an overlay telling, okay, at this point is where your janky performance is. So to diagnose those kind of in-depth diagnostics, you need this tool. Then you have the CPU profiling. So in case if you want to inspect your app and see how the CPU usage or the thread activity in real time. So we keep talking about the threads and all, but if you really want to see the in-depth of it, you have to look into this profile. And also while interacting with the app. So whenever you're interacting with the app, you need to see what is happening with the memory or the CPU usage. So to inspect these kind of in-depth analysis, we use this. And in general, like debugging or general logs or even memory issues, we use these kind of analysis tool. Or finally, if I just want to see my app size, I can just use this tool. So in a moment, I'll show you where to find out all this. So first thing, you create your app and you run it on your emulator. So you're good to go. So immediately you will have your emulator running. Then immediately you would have even your Dart views appearing here, whether you want to run your Dart DevTools. So they are divided into inspector, timeline, memory. So you can choose which kind of view you want to analyze as of now. If not, again, you can click on the bottom toolbar in your Visual Studio or a different options depending on your IDE. So that's where it is possible to see all this. And moving on to the Flutter Inspector. So when I say Flutter Inspector, let me go back to the slide. Yeah. So moving on to the Flutter Inspector, as I mentioned, this inspector helps you visualize your widget tree and understands the existing layout. So that's a small example of here where I have a simple home page, and this is how the tree structure goes. But we have two sections. We have detail tree and a layout explorer, right? So it is possible to view all this, and tab by tab we can help it. Say example, you want to select a particular widget mode. This actually enables your button in order to select a widget on your device. So it's just not selecting it on the tree, it's also selecting on your emulator also. So you can quickly see that there would be a border highlighting that particular widget. Or if you want to use refresh, kind of refreshing your current widget. Or if you'd like to slow down the animation. Say, for example, you have an app and there is an animation that's running, but you want to stop or you want to slow down the animation and see what's really happening in the background, you can do this. And also debug paint. Say, for example, you want to render or display borders, padding, alignment. You want to focus on those part, you can definitely use the debug paint. So that's your first thing as a general Flutter developer would use is the Flutter Inspector. Next, moving on to the Flutter Layout Explorer in your Dart tool. So what basically it does? It kind of explores your layout. So as you know, layouts consist of rows, columns, and all those kind of attributes. Now, how is it really helping? Say, for example, I want to kind of have some spacing between two components in a row. Every time I do a change, and then I kind of hit a hot reload and then view it on the app. But there is also a possibility while you kind of debugging, you can do this. And that is what you see here. So as of now, we just have the flex property. So I'm just going to quickly play this again so that you can see it. So select a particular widget where you have this flex property, change the flex value in the drop down. And then the best part is whatever you're changing, you can see that immediately on the device or the emulator. So as of now, I was changing the flex property on the app bar. So you could see that it is immediately changing the payment and the logo position. So you could see that. So that was a simple example, and it is really handy. Trust me, when you're developing things, you don't want to keep on checking your emulator. This is a very easy way of handling things. And decide and then update your code accordingly. And yeah, next moving on to the timeline view. Yes. So when I say timeline view, what exactly it does? Say a particular frame of your app gets really slow and you don't know what is it actually that's causing this. So in that case, what I could really do is timeline really comes in handy. So this is a simple example that I've taken, which is my same app, and you can see the red overlay over here. So this is basically the kind of a janky performance. So I took an example exclusively to show the janky performance here. So what happens here is timeline view comes really handy when you want to find out which widget is actually causing that slow frame. So you can select the frame and see where exactly this is happening. And also, it has a different view of showing it. You have the flame chart. You have a couple of other charts, which I'll explain it to you in a bit in the following slides. So this actually helps you to identify the problematic area, the frames, while seeing them in the context. Okay, only when I'm clicking on this button or when I'm navigating from this page to this page, this janky performance is happening. So each bar is each frame. So that is how you identify and start working on it. And there is also a couple of things that you can observe in this. One would be we all know that we have three threads: the UI thread, the raster thread, the jank thread. So UI thread, it executes the Dart code in the Dart virtual machine. And this code actually includes your application as well as your Flutter framework. That's simple. That's the main thread. There is another thread which is called the raster thread, which was initially called as the GPU thread. And this is exclusively, or it executes the graphic code of your Flutter engine. And you cannot directly access this thread. So, or its data for the matter. But if this thread is slow, then definitely you have done something with your Dart code or the Kriya graphics library. So you have to go in depth into it in order to check this particular thread, and which happens very rare. But that is good to know about it. There's something called raster thread. And there's another one called jank thread. It is basically the frame rendering chart shows the jank thread, that is the red overlay part. So whenever you see red stripes on your frames, that means there is a janky performance. So this is a little more in-depth detail as to which thread is actually causing the detail. So if you ask me how I can really work on it, is just run an app, go to the timeline view, refresh it, start recording, or start seeing how your timeline performs. Whenever you're trying to navigate and you see some kind of fluctuation in your graph, try to inspect it, go to the timeline event, go into a little more depth to understand what is happening. Next, moving on to the memory view, which is another tab in your Dart Dev tool. Now, when I say memory view, it actually gives you an insight of how your app is using the memory at a given point. And it also allows you to tracking platform memory as well. Say, for example, whenever you create a constructor, say my app or my class or any other constructor, now that portion is actually kind of residing in your heap memory. And you also have analyzers to accumulate these counts. Now, these accumulators can be used to study the rate of your memory allocation. So why am I emphasizing on this point is, so if you want to study where exactly your memory is getting used, you need to find these accumulation points. And you can also view all the objects in the Dart memory heap. So this was a sample one, which it was a simple app for me, so it did not use much of the memory part, so it was absolutely fine. But there are places where you can really look into it. And also it analyzes and attempts to identify any memory patterns that you can get that may cause leaks or lead to the application crash. So try deliberately giving an application crash in your application and then see how your pattern changes. So whenever you come across that pattern in future, you know that it's kind of not responding. Or to cite with another example is, say, for example, if you're loading a large image for thumbnail, which is really inefficient. So what you could do is, in this case, to improve the memory, you can adjust or you can load a smaller asset by adjusting the cache width and height to decode the image to a smaller size. That way you can reduce the memory. So try with a larger image, thumbnail, and then see how your memory chart reacts, and then try to reduce the size using the smaller asset and see how the chart looks like. So this is the only way you can play around and find out your memory part. Next, moving on to the performance view. So to diagnose an app with a performance problem, you need to enable the performance overlay to look into the UI or the raster thread or the jank thread, which I already informed in the timeline view. And make sure that you're not using an emulator, because using a real-time device and an emulator has a lot of differences because the characteristics are not the same. So try avoiding using an emulator and use a real-time device. And all performance debugging for Flutter applications should be conducted on a real-time devices, and it should be running in the profile mode. So if you really want to know how to run in a profile mode, there is a link in the reference section. So it will take you to the official Flutter site, and it will tell you how to enable with a command line the profile mode. And there you can actually interpret the graphs. And also you have that flame chart, call tree, and these kind of different displays to get a little more in depth into all those details. Or the bottom up, yeah. So this was one example of my performance view. So it was a simple app that I had. And you could see that the flame chart here, the call tree, and the bottom up. And so when you click on the call tree, it kind of expands and gives you a little more analysis. So try exploring with a simple counter app that you get when you try creating a Flutter application for the first time. Then coming to the last view, which is a kind of a network view, which I always really find it really handy, because as a web developer, or if you're building websites, if you had, or if you're still building websites, you know, the console tab in the network. Immediately, if I'm doing some kind of API request or HTTP request, I immediately look here, check what was the data sent or the get, the method, and all that. The similar way we have here in the Dart Dev tool, which allows all your network activities, inspect your HTTP, the WebSocket traffic without using the IDE. That is the best part. Even if I don't have IDE, and I can still use this and explore my network part. And if you'd like to also do a full source code level debugging, um, not the debugging part, sorry. I would say the recording the network traffic. And also if you have, you can check the logs of each event, and you can check it. And you can also record and stop, and you can download that record and play it again. So those kind of features are available in the network view. Then moving on to the debugger part. Well, I'm sure definitely as a developer, you must have used breakpoints, which is I use day in and day out whenever I'm stuck with something, just to understand the flow, or if I'm trying to analyze someone's code just to see how the flow is happening, I use the debug points. So definitely here also, without using the IDE, if I would like to do the debugging, I can just use my dev dart tools and I can start inspecting it. So I don't need an IDE to do this. Or if I want to do a kind of a full source debugging, or supporting breakpoints, or kind of stepping, using the stepping part, or the variable inspection, I can do using the debugger. And yeah, so we know we have seen all these views in a Dart Dev tool. Now, how is it supported in the mobile app, or the Flutter web app, or the other web, or the command? So this is a kind of an overview of it. So you can keep this in mind and start using it, because definitely on a web app, you say, okay, I'm not able to see the timeline view. Definitely it's in the beta stage. People are still working on it. And yeah, but if it's a mobile app, definitely you have all the features available. And in fact, every day there is features getting updated. So definitely look for it. And just to have a quick view as to what are the releases that are happening related to dev dart tools, I would say no more you have to have the browser. You can have your own integrated dev tools. And also they are kind of launching the dev tools in your default browser instead of Chrome. So initially it was just the Chrome, but now you can get it on your default browser also. And DevTools can be opened in an external browsers from the status bar, even if it is already open in an embedded view. So that option is also available. And kind of toggling between DevTools and your debugger tool, that is also possible. And also, whenever the DevTools become disconnected, when you stop debugging a session, you have to leave. But if you leave the window open, it automatically gets reconnected. So when you start the new debugging. So I know these are all very small nitty gritty factors that I'm talking about. But trust me, as a developer, when I'm working on it, this really helps me a lot. So I think as a developer, you need to understand or just keep yourself updated with these kind of updates. And as I said, whenever there is that session getting disconnected and you keep this window open, and when you restart your app, this gets automatically recorded. So I don't have to again exclusively open things for the Dart Dev tool to track it. All right. So, okay, until now I was talking about Dart, and you know how Dart and Flutter goes hand in hand. So I thought I'll also give you a quick recap on the releases that's happening with the Flutter part. So the first one being the navigation rail, where it's a new widget that's been offered for the responsive app navigation model. And it's great for apps if you're kind of switching between the mobile and the desktop version, and it makes that easy navigation for bottom navigation part. So in case if you're not update with these kind of releases, just keep yourself updated. Don't go for customization or any other hardcore way of doing it. So you could try this widget. This is one of my favorite updates that I was really waiting for, which was the transitions, or I would say it's like kind of a forward transition that describes animations between components and your full screen. So one is the transform, shared access, fade through, fade in, fade easier. And all I have to do is just drag and drop them, and I can delight the user experience using this. So that's one such update. And all this happened in 1.17, and this is in 1.20 release. So in this release, we had a lot of UI enhancement releases, including the most long awaited autofill, and also the second one, which is the interactive viewer widget, where you can literally pan and zoom, and the new mouse cursor support, and also the date. If you look at the date, it's just not selecting the date. You can select a span of dates, a range of dates, and also the text. So initially when I started working on Flutter, we did not have all this. So now people, our community is still contributing, and we have all kinds of updates happening. And this was a difference between the Flutter 1.22 and 1.20. So you can see the difference that the Flutter team has come up, and with solving that keyboard experience here. And as I mentioned, like how we have for Flutter issue tracker, all the issues, the same way we have even for Dart DevTool issue tracker. Please log on to this in case if you find something that you really need to work on it, or you have want to check if there is an open issue, you can find it out. Or if someone has already worked, it's a closed issue, check this. If you want to open a new one, you find it's kind of a buggy, please report it here at the GitHub DevTool issue tracker, and we would have teams working. Or if you want to support solving any of the issues also, you can work on it. And this is the couple of references section, so I'll just give it a second so that you can take a picture in case you want to get a little more deep dive into understanding how this really works. And then finally, you know that Flutter, Dart, they all are open source free communities. So we do have teams like Flutterista, which is basically focusing on identifying a woman or a non-binary, where it happens monthly. So it is an invites-based Slack community, and it's been run by two amazing people like Daniel and Stephanie. So if you'd like to join this community, it's free. All you need is a passion for Flutter, Dart, and some enthusiasm to join this community. You can contact them on Twitter, or you can get back to me on Slack or this chat, and I'll get you connected with these people. And also you have something called Hump Day Q&A session, which is happening, where we have all Flutter Dart developers around the world discussing about the issues or any new improvements or any project that you're stuck and you would like to have some kind of help. Definitely we have communities like that. So please do reach out to teams and get connected if you're really interested to join one. And yeah, I think that's it. I think you must have got a better, at least not a in-depth, but at least a better view as to how to use the Dart Dev tool. And as a Flutter developer, it's mandatory and important to keep the view and keep on inspecting and viewing all kind of analysis, whether it could be your memory, performance, timeline, understand your app a little more better rather than just creating the UI part of it. Because that's when you are really a full-fledged developer and understand your customers' need rather than just not building your app. And also in future, if you're stuck with it, you know where to see and how to solve it. So that's more an efficient way of developing apps. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for joining my session. If we have time, all right, I have 2 minutes. So if you have questions, you can leave it on the chat, or you can contact me on any of the social medias. I'm there to answer your questions. And thank you once again.
And my mic was muted. Yeah, totally unprofessional. Okay, thank you very much for this session. It was super nice because Dart DevTools, one of the things that Flutter developers and Dart developers definitely should know. And again, we have a special chat where you can ask your questions after the session. But we have time for one question, and the question is: you have a background in Android development and web development, and it looks like Flutter DevTools, they are more inspired by like web DevTools, like Chrome DevTools, not Android instruments for like debugging, profiling. And looks like there are two worlds. One, people prefer Android instruments, other prefer maybe even iOS instruments. What do you think, which one is better, or which one do you prefer more?
Definitely, I was an Android developer, so I know what were the pain points while using an Android app. And when I started initially, I was like kind of stuck, and I really don't know where to look into my app and all that. But after moving to Flutter, trust me, hands down, things are getting every day better and better. Whether it could be widgets, whether it could be with releases, tools, animations, anything as such, things are really happening. Really good. So I would say definitely first web and then Flutter. That is how my choice would go. But definitely, I respect people's opinion, and it's totally up to them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I believe and I think that Flutter DevTools, they would be upgrading and developing, and we will see them in the future.